Okay, welcome. It's May 20th, and you're at the Environmental Protection Committee. And I'm Alice Blank, Chair of the committee, here with Wendy Chapman, Co-Chair of the committee, and Patty Meltzer, Chair of the board. And a new assistant, Charlotte Newman, is helping us out on board this summer, and we're delighted. So we're going to start off. First, I just want to thank Justine Pucha, who had came up with this idea, although I don't see her online, but anyway, to talk a little bit about some of the state climate bills and what did and didn't happen in terms of the budget. And she put me in touch with Justin Wood, who we'll be hearing from after, our esteemed chief of staff, Fatim Shabani, who works with Assembly Member Charles Ball, is going to talk a little bit about climate goals and initiatives from your assembly district, and we're delighted you came in person, which I know is a haul, and I thank you. It's very helpful to see you. And yeah, you're going to go over a few. We have cheat sheets for those of you in the room that identify these goals and initiatives, which we will have online as well on the website. And go ahead, take it away.
Thank you all so much for having me. As Alice mentioned, my name is Fatim Shabani. I'm the Chief of Staff to Assembly Member Charles Ball. We proudly represent Lower Manhattan in our district. Although we haven't represented this area for a long time, we're proud to have this district, this area in our district now. So as Alice mentioned, there's been a few sort of changes as far as the environmental wins that we've had in the assembly. So I kind of just wanted to go over that. And then right after I go over those wins that we've had in budget this year, I kind of just want to just roll over to the sort of the environmental goals that we have moving forward as far as the state. So again, in this year's enacted budget, and again, everything that I'll mention here will directly or indirectly impact Lower Manhattan. So I kind of wanted to be very specific with the things I mentioned here because obviously New York State is huge and, you know, we don't want to cover the entire New York State. We're going to focus on what impacts Lower Manhattan, obviously what this community board covers. So
Just make sure you're talking into that Al and speaking as loudly as that. You know, sit down.
like I said,
Get comfortable, throw it down, whatever works.
just,
Thank you.
all right, so as you know, as far as some of the wins that we've had in this year's enacted budget, we were able to secure 500 million for clean water infrastructure. So that's to begin with. And then as far as EPF, Environmental Protection Fund, we were able to secure 39.5 million for land acquisition. So this is going to help preserve green spaces in urban areas. It'll potentially impact parks and rec areas in Lower Manhattan. We were also able to secure 26 million for municipal parks. And as you know, this can be used for upgrading and maintaining parks within Lower Manhattan, providing improved rec spaces as well for residents. And then finally, on the Environmental Protection Fund, we were able to secure 22.25 million for water quality improvement projects. So that's projects that fall with funding that includes to improve the water body surrounding Lower Manhattan. Moving ahead, on the green energy and sustainability, 250 million above the executive budget for clean energy projects. So these support sustainability initiatives that can improve energy efficiency, reduce carbon footprint. And then moving ahead, exemption of residential energy storage units from state and local sales taxes. This encourages the adoption of energy storage solutions, contributing to energy resilience in Lower Manhattan. And then lastly, 500,000 annual savings for consumers through exemptions on the residential energy storage units. This measure specifically is effective from June 1st, 2024 to June 1st, 2026. And it's going to promote the use of energy storage systems, likely to increase renewable energy usage in Lower Manhattan. So that was sort of in brief summary, some of the crucial and key environmental wins that we were able to secure in this year's budget. And then I kind of just wanted to sort of transition towards the state goals state environmental goals that we have moving forward post-budget. So that's on the handout that you all have in front of you. So to begin, net zero emissions by 2050. This is not new. I think we've seen this before. Obviously, it's going to reduce 85% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. Again, New York as a state, we're aiming to have completely carbon-free electricity sector by 2040. The expansion of renewable energy. So we have offshore wind energy, solar energy and energy storage, green buildings and energy efficiency. These are significant investments. Again, just aimed at increasing energy efficiency in buildings, including requirements for new constructions to meet stringent energy efficiency standards. And then the 500 million initiative to retrofit public and private buildings to higher energy levels. Moving on, we have investment in clean transportation. Again, this budget supports the transition to electric vehicles by aiming for all new passenger cars and trucks sold in New York to be zero emission by 2035. Investments in improving EV infrastructure, such as more charging stations across the state, protection and restoration of natural resources, continuing funding through EPF, supporting conserved and natural habitats, improving water quality, and protecting agricultural lands. 7, environmental justice initiatives. So aiming to ensure 35% of benefits from clean energy and investments go to disadvantaged communities, addressing historical inequalities in environmental health and economic opportunities. And then lastly, the clean water infrastructure, as mentioned earlier, again, allocated significant funds to improve water infrastructure, which is going to be crucial for preventing pollution and safeguarding water resources. And again, these are sort of the main goals that that we have in the assembly, but we obviously share with the Senate and the entire legislature moving forward post-budget. Some of these things can change. This is currently where we stand as far as the goals moving forward, but I'll share as far as the budget goes that we have to achieve, because I know I only brought the climate goals, but I'll share this document as well as far as what we were able to secure in this budget. So I hope that wasn't too long. Happy to take any questions, but I wanted to make this very brief and concise and kind of not overpopulate with info, because I know it can get extraneous. So
Appreciate it. Okay. Jeff.
You might not have the answer off the top of your head. Maybe Justin will have the answer, but it's a great goal to have 100% carbon free by 2040, but that's 16 years, less than 16 years away. Our production facilities have a long timeline to get built. So I'm curious, do we know what proportion is going to be what by 2040 if 0% is going to be fossil fuel? I mean, can there really be that much hydroelectric, solar, wind? How much, if any, is nuclear? Do we know those breakdowns?
I don't have those breakdowns off the top of my head, but I can definitely circle back and get those to you, sure. Again, it's one of those things where, and I don't want to compare this to, the housing crisis in New York City, but, there's a certain goal that we put out as a city as well, as far as reaching a certain amount of housing in New York City. Are we sort of on the road to meet that? I don't think so, right? But it's sort of the goal that we put out. As far as what we're doing to break it down, to reach the 2040, I can look to get that to you.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Wendy, are you so?
Yeah. So, thank you. I just want to tell you, we always love to get in the weeds. So, this is an overview. This
Yeah.
group loves to drill down. But, so when you were running through things, one of the things you mentioned that I don't think I caught entirely was something for 2024 through 2026 that I think was like maybe retrofits, or, it had a timeline, maybe I just didn't hear it properly. Can you go over what that was so that our neighborhood takes advantage of whatever that is, if it has a end date that the money runs out?
Yeah, you're talking about the annual savings, the 500?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm talking about. I just remember hearing 2024 through 2026. Everything else
Yeah.
seemed like, a
Yeah.
budget item and this
Yeah.
type of thing, and it.
Yeah, so
I don't know
I-
timeframe, but,
Yeah.
but I was hearing that specific date and I was like, what is that? And I missed it.
That's for the residential, energy storage units, so I can definitely get you info on that.
Yeah, so
Share.
I think one of the things that, when we think about, how are we gonna put batteries, storage units
Yeah.
in our apartment buildings, especially if it runs out in 2026. We're a neighborhood that are early adapters a lot of times. So I think we'd love to have a lot of information about that. And the other piece of this is that I didn't hear specifically passive house. So changing the building codes, this community board, Bob Schneck, who passed away recently, was one of the people that has been bringing the passive house standard to every time he could speak up about it. So I feel like, we're going to continue that. Is there anything in the building code asking for incentives? I don't think you could, an incentive towards passive house standards, which would be obviously, use a lot less electricity or retrofits, that type of thing.
I have not seen any information on that.
Yeah, if you could write passive house standard, or what else do they call it? There's a few other words, but we really, I think for new buildings, new construction,
Yeah,
it's kind of a no-brainer.
just trying to understand, so you wanna know.
Like, are there incentives?
For.
Yeah, are there tax breaks for builders who, because it costs more upfront because the walls are thicker and, there's more engineering. Are there tax breaks or incentives for, building passive house standards
Okay,
that would help the city reach the goal, a lot faster than, retrofits?
okay, I can look into that. I haven't seen anything that on the state side, but I can definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Michael,
With congestion pricing, I mean, there's a lot of concern about how that's going to affect the FDR drive.
Yeah.
Is there anything here that can mitigate against that?
So at this point, I think the state has made it very clear that they're on board with congestion pricing.
No, I understand that,
Yeah,
but it encourages everybody to use the FDR because it's free.
yeah.
Is there anything here to,
I haven't seen any mitigation efforts, no, I haven't seen, I can only speak obviously for our office specifically, where we're completely against congestion pricing. We just feel like it's just another tax burden on our residents, on the Staten Island side and on the Lower Manhattan side. So, I know Assemblyman Fall actually introduced two bills. One is to totally exempt the residents of Lower Manhattan, on congestion pricing and Staten Island as well. And then the other bill that he's introduced is to have a 2-year study on the environmental impacts of congestion pricing on Lower Manhattan residents. And the results of that study would have to be taken to the speaker of the assembly for review.
none of that's going to happen by June 3rd.
No, it's not, but those are some of the bills that we've introduced, obviously in opposition to congestion pricing. But I think from the state itself and the governor, it seems it's very clear that they're on board with moving forward with congestion pricing, so.
okay. Richard Corman, hi, online. Speak up a little.
Hello, Richard.
You're very soft. Could you speak a little louder?
Yeah, it sounds like you're underwater.
You come back to
him.
here.
Okay.
Let's come back.
Okay, so I think the only other person is Jeff. Did you have your hand raised again?
Yeah, it was a follow-up on congestion pricing. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that there are And there's lots of modeling of what's going to happen, what's supposed to happen, but we're not really gonna know what's going to happen until it happens in terms of different traffic patterns, in terms of whether it actually captures the people it's supposed to capture and so forth. And so it seems to me it's pretty obvious that it needs to be scheduled to be relooked at after it's implemented. Not necessarily to get rid of it, but it's definitely gonna need some tweaking if it's.
I agree. I totally agree. You know, I had conversations with the assemblyman, I think when sort of this was taking shape. And we kind of just said to each other, like, look, there's gonna be other members that are gonna do certain bills to say, hey, you know, emergency personnel or, parents who are picking up their kids would be, you know, certain residents should be exempt. So you're gonna have members on the assembly side and on the senate side passing bills once this goes through, just to mitigate certain things. So I think the rollout, and again, personally speaking, I don't think it's been good. It hasn't been clear. I think, you know, residents of Lower Manhattan and even the entire city and the outer boroughs, are not acknowledged in what this is gonna do. You know, I can speak for the other half of our district. We're gonna get tons of pollution. At least on the side. Staten Island and the Bronx are gonna get crazy amounts of pollution once congestion pricing hits. And MTA actually did their environmental was a draft assessment that they sort of released. In the assessment, flat out, they're telling us there's gonna be pollution in this borough and on the other. And there's nothing to mitigate that. There's nothing that they're gonna do to say, hey, well, there's gonna be more pollution here, but this is how we can stop it, or nothing.
Well,
So,
that was my point. I mean, we're gonna become an environmental justice community, disadvantaged community.
yeah,
You know, and can any of this money be used to mitigate that?
So I will say they did introduce something, I wanna say it was a federal incentive in the Bronx. And Tammy, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, because I know, Congressman Torres, who I believe does support congestion pricing, but he realizes how much pollution this will bring to his borough. So he was sort of asking for incentives, from the MTA and kind of sort of seeing what he can do on the federal end as well. Will that be enough? I personally don't think so. I think it's just only a matter of time till we see the actual health risks that, you know, this is gonna impose on our community, so. Tammy.
So I just want to point out in your district, Bowery Park City in particular, with the playgrounds that go along West Street also will be affected. It is one of the very few open play fields that we have in Lower Manhattan, not to mention the PSIS 89 school that is right on the West Side Highway that will be affected, as well as everything else going, including the bike path and the other end, the Hudson River Park. So it's, plus the other side of CB1 was also tagged for higher environmental impact
Yeah,
around the Brooklyn Bridge.
yeah,
So we will not get the funding as an environmental justice community until the damage is so far done because of the income discrepancies between Lower Manhattan and the sections of Harlem that were already redlined.
Mhm.
So I find it disingenuous that they're offering packages and highlighting one area who unbelievably needs it, but while saying to the others, oops, so sorry, you'll help fund until you get so sick.
right, exactly. Okay, and I think, you know, we actually had a press conference with the borough president in Staten Island, because he's actually filed a lawsuit, to MTA, regarding this, but, you know, in the presser, sort of in my remarks, I had mentioned about that draft assessment that the MTA released, you know, where they flat out cite the pollution that is gonna be caused on Staten Island, and there is nothing that they're saying, hey, you know, we have this incentive, we have this to combat that, we can, you know, we can pull some money from here. Nothing. There was just nothing said. So it just kind of leaves us flat and dry, wondering like, what can we do? Like we've already seen the impacts that COVID had on these communities. And now you insert pollution, right? Where we have, like I said, in that North Shore area where we had black and brown, the majority black and brown. And, you know, we see there's certain asthma rates that are higher than other
Exactly.
communities. And what is this gonna look like when this is fully in place and, taking off? So it's scary. It's just, like Tammy said, it's just disingenuous to like not have sort of a plan in place, as they're rolling this out. So.
I could have a whole night on congestion pricing to be sure. Richard Foreman, back at you. Any good?
He's
No,
muted.
He's muted. Oh, can.
Unmute, Richard.
Yes, with that, I think I fixed it. Did I? Can you hear me?
Clear.
Okay, good. Hi, Fatim. I wanted to go back to the clean water issues and ask if any money was set aside or discussion held about combined sewage overflows and whether anything specific has been allocated for that.
Richard, I did not see that specifically, in the report that we had, but I can circle back and get that to you.
Okay, thanks.
You got it.
It's one remaining important polluter of the Hudson for sure, and of all the surrounding rivers of Manhattan.
Yeah, after a rain.
Absolutely. Okay, Pat Moore, hi.
I just wanted to also add to the comments about the pollution that we have so many people in this community who are already suffering from after effects of 9/11 with COPD and other illnesses. Any additional pollution will just, air pollution will just add to people being sick. So that has to be taken into account.
Oh, okay, go ahead. And then I'm going to segue to Justin, but I'm going to ask you to stay because I think the overlap here is pretty important that we can flesh out more Q&A if we need it. I also promised Diana another.
I just have a quick.
Vera, go.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Thank for being here. So we have the Green Amendment, right? The state passed that. Has that been used or leveraged in any way to address some of the issues that communities are having that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Mhm.
I can definitely, like I said, circle back and get that to you, amongst the other things that some of the folks here brought up, but no, I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I know they're, like, right now, I'm not sure, with the heat act, I know they're sort of, Justin, you're probably on touch on that.
Oh, okay.
So I don't wanna,
Definitely.
I don't.
You don't want to steal you.
No, we should definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other thing that, maybe it's in here and I just don't understand that, it's our understanding that a lot of the composting bins that have been going in around the city are actually going to be used for biofuel making. Is any of this that's listed part of, composting for biofuel or, because composting, that budget seems to always get cut from, we're always concerned about that. And then the other piece of it is, you have composting for gardens and land and, parks, but you also have composting for biofuels. And I'm just curious if any of that's in this list.
I haven't seen that, no,
This composting is another,
but specifically for biofuel, you're asking?
well, I think that, the reason why I bring that up, because I think composting is a big issue anyway, but composting for biofuel, it takes the biofuel plants and it's a big infrastructure and, it seems to me that, I want composting on every level, but I
Yeah.
just feel like composting for, the state has an interest if they're looking for more power. I don't know if that's in here or not. It's just a general question and clearly I don't know exactly.
I did not see that specifically for biofuel. I did not see that in this year's budget. I'll
I just
Take a
think of
look
the
at it
list
again.
of all
Yeah,
the
I'll
things
take
we
a
have
look
to
at
get
it
rid of.
again, maybe,
Yeah.
and see what I can come up with, and obviously I can reach out to the speaker's office as well and see if they have anything on that, but I did not see that. No.
So I'm getting a texted question on something that I think now will be covered by Justin. So, as I introduced earlier, Justin Wood, who's the head of policy, the director at the New York Lawyers of Public Interest, is going to talk a little bit about, some of the bills that some of the state budget bills and
Yeah.
climate. And there's an overlap because the question about heat came up. So,
Obviously.
yeah, so you're not yet out. Okay.
This is, thank you, Fatem, it's great to be able to have a, conversation at the end of the legislative session like this in our district. So I'm Justin Wood, I'm the Director of Policy at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, which is a New York-based civil rights legal organization with an environmental justice, a disability justice, and a health justice program. And I'm here tonight with sort of the environmental justice hat on. We're also on the steering committee of New York Renews, which is the huge statewide community environmental justice and labor coalition of, it's really grown over 380, I think now, organizations statewide that are pushing for environmental justice, climate action in our state. And I think just wanted to talk about some of the active issues before the legislature, because the legislative session is just wrapping up in the next 2 weeks. And I know some of the last committee meetings are this week. And then my other hat is I'm also your neighbor in Staten Island and also a constituent of Assemblymember Fall. And it's great to be here in the same district. All waterfront communities that are hugely impacted by the accelerating climate crisis. And we don't even need to rehearse what that looks like. We're at the 1-year anniversary of toxic wildfire smoke. We know what rising sea levels are doing to lower Manhattan, to Staten Island, to Brooklyn, to our transit systems and our infrastructure. So I think maybe it makes sense just to talk about our coalition, New York Renews, chose 3 or 4 bills to really focus on. And Fatem, I appreciate this list of goals because these are the goals that are baked into the state's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which we pushed to pass. And it's now, I think, 5-6 years old, 2019. And that law really made New York State a leader in the United States. It's really I think probably the most forward-looking climate law in the country that puts into law ambitious, but we need to achieve them if we're going to, survive and transition to a green jobs economy successfully. So it puts some of these energy sector goals and an economy-wide emissions reductions, greenhouse gas emissions goals into law. Critically, there are also provisions, as you shared, Fatem, to specifically protect disadvantaged communities that cumulatively through this scorecard that the state put together face the biggest environmental and social burdens from pollution. And I think the issue that our coalition has is this law is fantastic. These are a great set of goals, but we are frustrated that we haven't seen the funding or legislation necessary in the last few years to actually put these goals into action. There are good things, thank you, that the legislature and governor have done, but in our view, it's not nearly enough when we get down to how do we get to clean energy by 2040? How are we going to rapidly scale up things like transportation, that fossil fuel-free transportation? How are we going to rapidly scale up the building storage and retrofits? We know the huge challenges that New York City faces in getting there. So in the last 2 weeks of the legislative session, it's our hope that the Assembly and the Speaker of the Assembly will pass 3 key bills that will help enact this climate law. And I just jotted them down. I brought slides, but I don't think we need to necessarily go into those. I think it's great to have a conversation. The 3 bills were really
Have them if you'd like to.
If you want to have them, just.
We
might
can
be
skip to
helpful.
the slides on the bills if we need bill numbers, but,
It might just be able for people just to. see
Yeah,
what
sure,
it is.
sure.
I mean, you can speak extemporaneously without, the slide there, but, okay.
sure. Yeah, so some of the three bills, that we think are critical to pass this session, and these are things that the legislature can act on right now in the next 2 weeks, are one that's going to, so the first few slides are on the costs of the climate crisis. I mean, I think one thing that's important to remember is the bill for us, taxpayers and homeowners and renters and transit users, is already happening. I mean, the costs are huge, of what we're already bearing in the climate crisis, not to mention the less quantifiable costs, that we're paying without health. And we're really facing challenges in getting to our renewable energy goals. I mean, specifically the downstate power grid, for example, is way behind. And our coalition fully supports the investment in offshore wind and the things that we have here. We just think more is necessary to rapidly scale up things like solar and grid interconnection and offshore wind in our communities to actually have any hope of hitting the goals that are in the law. So maybe we could skip ahead to, there we go. The bills we're hoping will pass are the Just Energy Transition Act, which would actually start to plan for some of the transitions we need away from fossil fuel power plants to renewable energy, and actually do this in a structured, planned, rapid fashion. Our district is surrounded by some of the oldest and dirtiest power plants in the downstate region. I know we have a huge one on Staten Island, on the West Shore. We have peaker plants all around us that actually kick on only on the hottest, most energy intensive summer days. They're the most expensive to run, which hurts us as Con Ed ratepayers. And they're also the most polluting for us to breathe. So when air quality is already at its worst, these power plants tend to kick on and make things much worse. So we're really hopeful. I just heard today that this bill is going to hopefully get a vote in the Energy Committee of the Assembly tomorrow. Fitim, our hope is that Assemblymember Fall would sign on as a sponsor and really champion this with the speaker to bring this to the floor. It should have the votes to pass. And that's happening this week. The next bill on the next slide. Can we go one more? I hope I didn't. Yeah, there we go. I put two number 3, sorry. New York Heat, which you mentioned, Fitim, is a critical bill in our coalition's view. This one's gotten a lot of publicity. Thank you to Assemblymember Fall for being a co-sponsor. It's our hope that he'll also really push this with the speaker, because this bill has not moved in the Assembly, and we're not entirely sure why. We're worried that there's some legislators from Western New York holding this up, is what's been reported. This is a bill that would help transition the gas heating system that we know we need to get away from. We know what it does to us to breathe air that's where we've been combusting gas in our boiler rooms and in our furnaces and in our stoves, and would start to change the incentives for utilities and actually align state utility regulations with the goals of the Climate Act. So there's a lot of outdated things in our state's regulations now where if you have a neighborhood and only one house in the neighborhood that's near a gas line wants a hookup to gas, let's say everyone else has gone electric or is starting to go electric, the gas utility still has to pay the cost to hook that building or house up, which makes no more sense as in New York City and New York State, we're going to all electric buildings and all new construction. And we as National Grid in New York City ratepayers end up paying millions of dollars a year in our rates to keep and maintain a gas system that we need to get away from. The other aspect of the HEAT Act is affordability. It protects the most energy burdened, so the households that pay the highest percentage of their income in energy costs, it puts into law an already existing state goal of capping that at 6% of annual income to make sure that as we transition to electric heat, the buildings that are still, the people that are still on gas, maybe because the subsidies haven't been big enough yet to get their buildings to electric, aren't gonna pay an outsized proportion of their income. And again, there's a lot of energy burdened households in this district. I know I've looked at the North Shore maps and it's a large number of households on the North Shore. So this is a really critical bill. We've heard that it could move this session, in the next 2 weeks. Really encourage everyone to check this one out. There's a big rally in Albany on Wednesday, in favor of this bill. And then the third and final bill that New York Renews is hoping will pass this session is the Climate Superfund Act, sponsored by Senator Krueger of Manhattan and Assemblymember Denowitz of the Bronx. This would help to start shift some of the costs, a fair share of the costs of the climate crisis that we're all paying to clean up and which will get worse onto the biggest polluters. So there's a list of the biggest fossil fuel polluters, many of which have been systemically denying the impacts of climate change for decades, who would pay into, just as we do with toxic waste Superfund sites, where the corporations that created those toxic sites have to pay to clean them up. This would create a climate superfund for New York State, where things like resiliency, things like helping homeowners and renters deal with flooding, things like investing in the transit system, which needs to be protected from flooding, or our bridges and tunnels, our roads, our parks, everything. This would create a fund to the tune of $3 billion a year that would help so taxpayers aren't the only ones footing the bill for climate cleanup. The state comptroller recently released a report that in municipalities across the state, it's up to 50% of municipal budgets is now going to dealing with climate resiliency or mitigation in some, or cleanup in some form or another. So this bill is really important and a revenue positive bill for the state, to shift some of that burden onto the corporations that created the problem and really should pay their fair share. So I'll leave it there, but those are the big priorities for this statewide coalition, and we're hopeful that the Speaker of the Assembly could be moved to bring these to a floor where we think they would definitely pass.
Citizens sounds like a tad of a lobbying effort, which I think is just fine.
Yes,
For the purposes
frankly,
of the
yes.
community. I think that's fair in terms of, I imagine there's people, at least in this committee and maybe even on our board, that don't support these bills. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I know, I know I do. But I'm just curious, I see that Deborah Glick, who by the way was invited, but unfortunately her office couldn't come, and she's coming next month. But speak on the same topic. Is Assemblymember Fall, of these three bills, does he support these bills?
I know he supports the Heat Act. I think he was an early supporter of the Heat
Yeah,
Act.
it's a co-sponsor, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other two bills, he's obviously not a co-sponsor on those two bills. I'm not sure if we've gotten, and again, Justin, I'm not obviously putting this on you, but we haven't gotten that much sort of lobbying for those two bills. I know for the Heat Act, it was just in our office every day.
Okay.
And so, that was sort of an initial, co-sponsor on that, but the other two, not as much. So that's currently where we stand.
Can I ask a question about?
Go ahead, yeah.
So the Superfund Act, do they have to, like, it's good in theory, but like, what happens? Do you have to, sue for a property that, or a location that got polluted, or, like, how do you identify who the perpetrators are? Especially because, oil is such a global commodity and, they don't, it's kind of everywhere. I mean, it's a little bit like, now that how do you figure that out?
That's a good question, and I can follow up I'm not an expert on the funding mechanism. I believe there's a list of companies that have released proposed greenhouse gas emissions in New York State. And Senator, I'll send you some info from Senator Krieger's office.
So they already know who,
They know who the list would be, and they would pay into a fund, that, and then there's the list of things the fund, and the estimate, it would total about 3 billion a year. The list of eligible projects, and then that's for us, the residents of the state to propose what projects. But I think it can be used for everything from resiliency, retrofits, electrification, which you mentioned, Fitton, which is huge, of course, climate priority, for transportation. So I'd be glad to send some detailed info on the funding mechanism.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, just have it's not a question, it's more so, sort of comment on the HEAT Act. So I'm not sure who the Congress member is, but I think there's a bill being introduced, where it would allow folks to keep their gas stoves. And so I'm not sure if that has anything to do with, obviously, this bill being held up, but there's sort of, I know there's been like a little controversy around it.
Yeah, I think that one was federal. I saw it and probably won't pass. But was just about some energy efficiency standards that the Biden administration had. I think I saw what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The HEAT Act is not gonna mandate any changes for homeowners or buildings. It's going to simply say, we shouldn't keep, there's not a level playing field between electric and heat now because we're artificially, or electric and gas, because we're artificially subsidizing the gas side of things. All of us who pay national grid rates or, different utilities across the state. And to help ease the transition to electric heat, we know that things like heat pumps and insulation are much more efficient, and that energy, of course, can be generated renewably, which fossil gas cannot. We don't have a level playing field currently. And so I think that's the intention behind the bill, is to take away those artificial subsidies where if you're in a community where only one of 100 buildings is saying, we want to keep gas, everyone else has to keep paying for that gas line to be maintained.
Good point. Jeff.
I was gonna respond to Wendy's, but I just want to address gas briefly. I think that will be, one reason I think this may have difficulty passing is that it will be somewhat like congestion pricing in that it's good in theory, but lots of people will object to anything that discourages them or makes it more difficult to have gas stoves and those kinds of things because people like them, whether it's good for them or not. But that's a separate issue. On the Superfund, I took a look at the statute and it's not 100% clear how it's done, but fundamentally it defines responsible parties as people engaged in extracting or refining fossil fuel. And basically, whoever does the most of that pays into a Superfund. I have a policy problem with that. It's very different from pollution superfunds, where you've got someone who polluted who did some pollution. All these guys was feed our appetite. All these guys did was feed our appetite for fossil fuels. I mean, I drive a car, I use fossil fuels. Does that mean I want to penalize Exxon for giving me, the ability to fill up my, gas tank? And the problem with fossil fuels is not, in my view, like one set of companies' creation. It's all of us. And until recently, there were not good substitutes. And even now, there's not easy substitutes. That's why you have to have all these incentives to switch, because if you were just going by what's easiest, what's currently works, people would still be using fossil fuels. And to penalize, and it also applies only from 2000 to 2018. So you're penalizing people who fed our appetite during a time period where that was the only appetite we had. I mean, ultimately, it'll be a tax on all of us because they'll pass it on in higher prices. But if it's gonna be a tax, it should just be a tax, you know, to fund resiliency projects rather than sort of painting it randomly on the people that happen to feed our appetites. Now, maybe it works out in practice a little different than this. Maybe there'll be regs on it that, you know, there's some evil person that's responsible for creating our desire for fossil fuels, but I think we all know that's not what happened. It was us. It was us collectively that created this problem, not some mastermind who should now be punished.
It's a good point. I don't know if Justin, you want to respond. We've got exactly, and I'm already 20 minutes over what I promised Diana, and I'm gonna keep to 7. I don't care where we're at. But if you want to respond to that, I mean, I'm sure you've responded to it before.
Well, I'm not sure everyone had good alternatives during all of those years, but I think the idea is we're already through our taxes paying for all of this. I mean,
And so
You
we
name
should
it.
continue to.
yeah, the battery part, you know, all of the, I mean, half of this area is having to be raised up because we know what's gonna happen next time there's a big hurricane. I think the idea is that the companies that put the most greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere during that period are also raking in like record profits. I don't know the numbers, but it's billions in profits. And it's a fair share. I mean,
If
they
it
don't-
means
they don't
people
pay
that
for
were
it.
actually polluting, that's one thing, but the way I read it, it's us that are polluting. I'm the one driving my car. Exxon isn't driving my car. And as I understand this statute, they're determining who is the so-called polluter based on, did they sell the most gasoline to people? And that's us that did it. That's not Exxon that threw I mean, Exxon, yeah, does some pollution in their industrial operations, but I don't think that's how it's measured. It's measured by how much gasoline did they sell? How much natural gas did they sell? How much fuel? And to me, assigning to some company that happens to have the majority of that is a randomness when it's really all of us. And it's gonna be disproportionate to energy states. Why should Texans have to pay for our resiliency project? You know, I mean, yeah.
Let me count the ways, don't.
Yeah.
No, or Alaskans or whatever.
This is a big topic, which I think, yeah, we'd have, you
It's
know,
complicated.
yeah.
Yeah, that's,
But
you
it's
know,
good
and
point.
the details matter, and maybe it's okay when you look at the details.
I
but-
think that would be my response, is I am sure that that there's probably a lot to this that we're not reviewing, that would answer some of these questions. Anyway, Tammy, I'm gonna have you with the.
So I'm gonna take it from a different path. It is really hard to get people to want to electrify when the cost barrier is so high.
Yeah.
I understand intellectually, because we do the resiliency, but I'd be one of those people who isn't psyched about electric anything, because the building that we live in is so very expensive with the electric, that I think the good Lord that I have a gas stove, quite frankly, because the barrier for using the electricity is intense. And one of the energy efficient ways that landlords have been going about things is, oh, we will just either increase the rates or push the costs onto tenants. And that goes for everything from water on meter and everything. And I just think that until you can find a way to fix that, it's very hard to make people want to do renewable energy. It's the same type of things where the barrier to do in the beginning for solar was so high for the construction costs and everything to add to the houses. And then there were laws against using solar, which kind of is bizarre, on homes, independent homes and buildings and things. So we've gotten better by a long shot of understanding that, you know, maybe we shouldn't go down that road, but we really need to find a way to make it cost effective, to make people want it. And I'm sorry, but when you're talking about like a pizza place, the coal burning oven is significantly less expensive when you're selling something that's $1 a slice. And in a city where everything is so expensive, pushing this along, I think, is really difficult until we pull back and look at ways to make it sustainable for all income bands. Move ahead.
Okay, I can see where this is going, and it's not what I had in mind for tonight, and then we have a full flush. So I'm gonna ask another member, public member, on our board, Carrie Parker Davidson, who had her hand up. Carrie, I think you're the last person, and it'd be great for you to come back. I will say that with this logic, though, that I'm hearing, then we would say things like, well, the urgency of this isn't that critical. You know, if you look around and you consider climate change, maybe it's just as critical as paying the billions of dollars we are towards the resiliency efforts throughout the coastlines of New York. So I'm not sure I really totally buy you better figure out a way to make it cheaper. Yes, of course, but fact is it has to happen. And so a lot of these bills are looking to do that. Okay, you want to say something?
Well, really quick, I mean,
Yeah.
the basic take we have on the budget is absolutely, we cannot do any of these things without heavily making them affordable. So we need to make it, so we're rapidly building out solar. We know
Right.
solar is coming down. We know offshore wind could be cheap once it's built. We have to make the investments now, and that's why we want things like a super fund or money, the $1 billion we wanted in the budget for all of these community priorities. Because absolutely, individual homeowners or renters cannot just make decisions on their own.
Right.
If gas is subsidized and electric's more expensive, we know we have the means to make electricity very cheap and renewable in the state, and we should do that. Absolutely agree.
100%. Great. Okay, Carrie, are you with us?
You have to unmute Carrie because she cannot.
Oh, here we go, Carrie. You're
Yeah.
getting unmuted.
Now, you said, there.
There you go.
Maybe a suggestion, instead of penalizing the Superfund extractors, maybe it could be tailored to the increase in extraction so that you penalize heavily for the increased extraction, but you don't penalize them for extracting itself, so that you can incentivize the reduction rather than penalizing them from the get-go. Because all of these energy companies have termination risk. They know that fossil fuels has an end date, and they're pumping as fast as they can to make money as fast as they can. So if you penalize the increased extraction, you might get the result that you want. Just an idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Well, I'm not sure how we could finalize this except to invite you back when we have time to actually write a resolution and really flesh this out and have, because it's a fantastic conversation, and to have representation from our assembly member, it was great. And we could get, other assembly members in the districts in on the conversation the next time the state bill goes. Well, I wish you luck. I don't think we as a board could, in this short time, do much in terms of, writing a letter, a resolution, except to say, I hope that Assemblymember Balls is listening to this in some way, that you'll get back to him about what seems like some pretty hard work and critical bills that are still pending, and hope that you have a takeaway that's positive to this experience, which you can impart. Without lobbying here, but.
It shows that the goals are important, but it's hard to get there.
Yes, thank you, well put. And thank you very much for coming. And I encourage you to stay because, in fact, what's coming next, and my last question is a segue to having Diana Sweetype from EDC do the kickoff for the financial district and Seaport review of the climate resilience plans with an eye towards sustainability. Is that something that, are you very involved in all those conversations with EDC? Your office, are you pretty much always?
We are,
The
anything.
team, I'll
kind of-
sit next to you.
Just want to
And I
make
was just
sure.
gonna say, I work with the team all the time. His district overlaps my portfolio at EDC.
But I know it does on the shore of Staten Island. I mean, on the shore of Lower Manhattan, Battery Park City.
Yes, absolutely. And
Just
even-
asking.
Yeah.
Both
even,
sides, yeah.
Obviously, the recent news with I don't know, that was, again, something new that,
You might want to tell everyone.
Obviously, like
this
that-
is about the-
yeah, so even that part, that Red Hook part with the marine terminal, that announcement that just happened, that's part of our district as well.
Oh,
Yeah, so we're
wow.
one of two assembly offices that have a tri-borough, we're tri-borough district.
That's an amazing project. Maybe
Yeah.
one of you will
Yeah.
update everybody about that because that's a huge
Yeah, so.
I did nothing bad. I don't know if anyone else did with the record.
But yeah, so all across, obviously that, Lower Manhattan, Staten Island, we definitely work very closely with Diana, so, and she's always so gracious, providing us,
And Battery Park City Authority is working with it. Okay, well, that's great. Okay, so I guess this is a good slightly segue into your portion of the agenda. Justin, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
You're
Thank
not
you.
required to stay, but we welcome you to stay.
I appreciate it.
And thank you. And I look forward to you coming back. It's
That'd
really
be great.
helpful. We've never done this before, and I don't know about all of you. I found that really invaluable to get a sense of what the legislation is, and, you know, earlier on would be really great. So don't hesitate to contact the board and let us know, like, you know, this would be a good time to let your board know what's going on, let the community know, and yeah, and to lobby a little or do whatever it is that people want to do.
Perfect. Okay. Thank
That's
you.
great. Thank you so much. All right. Diana, sorry, but I am in the hour.
No, this feels early for me, actually, in short time, so no worries. For posterity, my name is Diana Sweetie. I'm the Lower Manhattan Borough Director for EDC's Government and Community Relations Division. Thank you for having us here tonight. We're here to present our energy and sustainability update on the 5i Seaport Climate Resilience Master Plan. I'm joined tonight by some of my colleagues online. I'm going to pause in a moment so we could do a round of introduction. But to set a little context first, you know, you're used to seeing us here quarterly for the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Quarterly updates. In that meeting, you get kind of a high-level snapshot of where we are in the project. We kind of squeeze in as much information as we can and talk about next steps. But the project is huge and there's a lot of work going on the project all of the time. One of those specific work streams is energy and sustainability. We've been talking about this, and you might have heard about some of these things recently as it relates to another LMCR project, Battery Coastal Resiliency, and we were very excited to have earned the Platinum Envision Award for the project. Envision specifically, similar to kind of how LEED works for buildings, there's an increasing attention on sustainability for things like infrastructure projects. And Envision is for civil infrastructure projects. It looks specifically at resiliency, sustainability, and equity for civil infrastructure projects. And I'm noting that specifically, not just because it overlaps with what we're here to talk about tonight, but that's run by the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure. And I connected them with Alice and the community board. We're trying to set up a meeting for them to come in June to talk a little more specifically about their program. But again, it overlaps what we're here to talk about this evening with energy and sustainability. Like I said, you get that snapshot every quarter, but there's a lot of work going on in between. Energy and sustainability is one of those. We had a workshop at the end of March to really share all of the information that we're doing on energy and sustainability as it relates to this project. The project is so much more than just a physical barrier protecting Lower Manhattan from climate change and water, but we're thinking and planning very proactively as it relates to how do we construct once it's built, how do we operate this in a way that's sustainable? So there's a lot of work to be done, and we're really excited to share our progress on that. And we've kind of synthesized the content that was in our workshop at the end of March to present to you this evening, but it's also, hopefully you have received it and maybe had a chance to review it, but we kind of packaged it all together in a way that we can be shared. There's a survey so people can kind of share their thoughts, and we're excited to kind of continue that conversation with everybody. But before I end up presenting all of the information from our presentation, why don't we do an introduction for the people that are here online, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to the team for the deck.
They're all.
Yeah, go ahead, Julia.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if that was my cue or not, but thank you so much, Diana. I really appreciate that intro, and I have to apologize in advance. My video is not quite working very well tonight, and I even have a nice blazer on. So apologies for that, but it's so nice to see a few familiar faces. And yeah, I think that was a really great setup for this presentation. We're really excited to walk through, how we've been thinking about energy sustainability with this group. I know, a few of these faces are familiar, but for those who have not met before, my name is Julia Chen Rinaldi, and I'm on the Arcadis project management team for the FIDE Seaport project. I'm joined here today by my teammate and sustainability expert, Megan Coleman, who I will let introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Pleased to meet you all today. Great to hear so much discussion around energy sustainability this evening. I have been advising this team. I was brought on to advise this team on the energy sustainability components of the project and making sure we're thinking of things very broadly, the social, environmental, and economic components. And I work with J.K. Muir, New York City WBE firm, and we specialize in public infrastructure projects. I'll pass it over to Alexis.
Hi all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Alexis Taylor. I'm VP of Climate Resilience at EDC, and also project director for the overall FIDE Seaport project. We're very excited that you've invited us back to present on this specific work stream, which we have invested considerable time into, especially in this phase of work. And so with that, I will hand it back to the consultant team to present the work.
That sounds great. And Diana, if you could go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So just a quick note on the agenda today. The first thing we'll do, we're just going to talk really briefly about the project in general. I think most folks here are quite familiar with this project, but just in case it helps to have a bit of a refresher, we'll spend just a couple of slides just talking about the FIDE Seaport Master Plan as a whole. And then we'll really get into the meat of it. So we'll go through, again, how we're thinking about energy sustainability, our approach, how we've been thinking about, building this quite massive infrastructure in a way that is low carbon, how we're thinking about different sustainable strategies with regards to nature, water, heat, and then finally we'll talk a little bit. Of course, we'll take questions at the end, but we'll also talk a little bit about how we can continue to engage with you all to hear your feedback about how we should be approaching ENS, and if there's any ideas that we should be thinking about, and any other input that you may have. So if you want to go to the next slide. Perfect. All right, so here we are. Again, just a quick project overview for those who may need a little bit of a reminder. So of course, what is the FIDE Seaport Climate Resilience Plan? So first and foremost, the plan is a shared city community vision for a resilient 21st century waterfront. So it is intentional, but it is intentionally flexible. It identifies core infrastructure and really sets aside space for future programming on top. So I think probably the defining feature of our design is, of course, the 2 levels of flood protection. So we have a lower level to protect from daily tidal flooding, as well as an upper level to protect from coastal storms. Of course, we do envision that this flood protection would extend into the East River. So right now, what that looks like is, up to a full city block at some locations, which is about 200 feet, and down to about half a block at other locations. And the width of that shoreline extension is really so that we can accommodate things like universal access on top. A couple other big features to call out. So of course, we do have an approved drainage system as part of our early designs, including a pump station, and that's so that we can remove all the rainwater that will be accumulating in the streets and homes, now and into the future. And then finally, the ferry terminals on site, we envision that these will be reconstructed in a way that benefits the users, but is also resilient for generations to come and protected against climate change. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I think some folks are probably familiar with this idea of Resilience Plus that we talked about in the context of FIDE Seaport. To sum it up, Resilience Plus really reflects our belief that coastal resilience infrastructure can be so much more than just flood defense, just as Diana was saying earlier, right? So it can protect us from sea level rise and coastal storms, but it can also provide open space, universal access, waterfront views, resilient ferry terminals that accommodate electric ferries, educational opportunities, recreational opportunities, connectivity to the city side, really all kinds of waterfront experiences that don't really exist today in this area is what we're trying to achieve. So when we're thinking about this Resilience Plus concept, we're thinking about it specifically within 3 distinct geographies along the waterfront. So of course, here you see from south to north, we have the Resilient Ferry Hub. Then moving more towards the center of the project, we have what we're calling the Waterfront Park. And then finally, at the northern end of the project, we have what we're not calling it because it's already called that, Seaport Piers. And I think, we all can appreciate that each of these areas has a very unique character based on their existing conditions and the different opportunities that they currently offer and can offer in the future. And of course, taken as a sum, these three geographies really create a cohesive waterfront that's connected with, circulation, open space, and infrastructure, and will be so even more in the future. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to start getting to a little bit of E&S, and I'm going to start that by talking about something very important, which is that we recognize that big infrastructure can be very, very carbon intensive. What we're building is going to be absolutely transformative, and we're not taking it lightly that work must be done in a way that does not contribute to the harmful emissions that are driving climate change, which is, of course, the very thing that we are trying to protect against. So in our Resilience Plus approach, we are really driving this idea that climate mitigation really has to be aligned with climate adaptation. And we're doing that through things like harnessing natural energy sources, creating healthy natural spaces that can support thriving ecosystems, as well as making thoughtful decisions about materiality and construction. And Megan will talk through a lot of these exciting studies that we're doing shortly here. This is just a bit of a teaser into how we're thinking about it. Great. Before I do hand it off to Megan to take us through E&S, I do want to revisit this slide. A question that we get often when we talk about this project is, how long is this going to take and where are we in the process? So the short answer, is that currently we're working towards schematic plans for our base infrastructure. That we're currently doing that right now through the fall, and that will take us to a preliminary design next year for the base infrastructure. So that's basically anything that is the project footprint. Everything topside, so to speak, so things like, open spaces, exactly what they'll look like, programming opportunities, exactly what those will look like. Those will remain at a more advanced conceptual level at the end of the next summer, while the base infrastructure advances to preliminary design. And of course, that is so that we're able to take this project at the end of next summer and really set ourselves up for the very long and complex environmental review and permitting process. So overall, I think we're looking at something like a 10 to 15-year timeline for complete implementation. But when I say that, I also do want to recognize that we have urgency in this project. Sea levels are rising quickly. It could be any day now when the next Hurricane Sandy comes. So we do recognize that there is a great sense of urgency in getting this project done and constructed as soon as possible. And on that note, I think I'll pass it to Megan to talk us through some of the certifications that we're looking at, and then walk through some of the E&S strategies as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. So we are definitely, when we talk about a sustainability framework for a project, we came onto the team and we wanted to make sure that we're framing things very early. And part of that process involves using third-party certifications to guide. They have very detailed guidance manuals that are available. And as Diana said, the Envision is really broader civil infrastructure certification. Then Wedge, some of you may be already familiar with this one. This was developed within the city of New York, and it's a context with the context of waterfront specifically. And then the LEED building is really more building specific focus. And then the last but not least, Sustainable Sites Initiative. So that's around like ecosystem plantings, that type of thing. Oftentimes, this is a very costly process, but what I can say, speaking from experience, it increases the accountability of teams to make sure that we are instituting the sustainability initiatives in alignment with the New York City goals. Next slide, please. So in terms of prioritizing, because there are so many elements to this project, we really want to engage this community because we cannot do this alone. We have a real challenge in front of us, and one of the advantages of this is the longer timeline, because there's a space and opportunity in our eyes for some innovation supporting the EDC Green Economy Action Plan and other initiatives within the city. And we really want to make sure our priorities are made very clear for this project from an energy sustainability lens. And as you can see on the screen here, there are 6 primary categories, although not exclusive. We are really using all of the prior slides, third-party sustainability certifications, to make sure we're looking at every element. But in terms of communicating and making sure we're prioritizing in the right places, these are the things that we want to make sure as a public infrastructure project we are serving. And part of that process is the emissions, as we've been talking about all evening. Air quality is a really big concern. We don't want to disproportionately affect anyone. And so there are 2 ways emissions are emitted. There's some from construction. And so unfortunately, in order to construct this flood wall, it's highly emissions intensive. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of materials available, or we don't know the structural length of time that material can last over time. And so in terms of the opportunities, we are definitely interested in ensuring that we're using low carbon but long lasting materials. So how do we minimize our embodied carbon is the technical term. And then we also talk about reducing emissions from daily use. So this is your things like your gas stove, your gas furnace, and things of that along those lines. And so how do we think about reducing our emissions of our buildings? How do we think strategically as we construct these buildings? And then another topic is conserve fresh water. Less of an issue in this area, although will increasingly become a stressor. And so how do we continue to conserve our fresh water on site and think of alternative water uses to potable water? Can we use gray water and stormwater on site? So our team is really exploring that. And then we want to plan for a warmer world. We don't want people to be standing and fainting out in the heat. So we really want to make sure we're thinking about how do we mitigate extreme heat. We want to make sure we have shade structures, people are comfortable as temperatures continue to rise. And then of course, manage heavy rains. That's a very real implication for our team and for the city. And so it's a real challenge. And of course, the project is inherently a flood wall, but within that, there's also stormwater management and thinking up through that. And then the last but not least, how can we continue to support a biodiverse city and invite green space? There's a lot of benefits, not just for biodiversity, but also from a personal use. Next slide, please. So when we think about public infrastructure projects, we really want to be thinking in the context of what we call life cycle assessments. And what that looks like is really thinking through, okay, where are we extracting materials from? So on the left side of the screen, it's raw material sourcing. Where are we sourcing from? Are we sourcing from China? And it has to fly, on a barge or on a plane, or are we sourcing it more locally? Are we thinking about that? Are we supporting our region? And are we intentional about those choices? So oftentimes for a project of this size and magnitude, we really need to identify that early on. So there's some coordination that we need to do as a group. And then as we progress, so there's manufacturing, we need to mold that material into the way it needs to be ready to go. Then we transport to the site. And then as we all know, construction is very loud and is on site. So how do we think about how construction is done and quickly and reduce emissions in the process? And then also use in operations. So as I was talking about the gas stove, along those lines, are we thinking about what are our energy users on site? And then maintenance and repair. We don't want to be having to invest a lot of money into a resiliency project that ends up being meaningless. We want to make sure it lasts a long time for us, decades to come. And then last but not least, are we thinking about when we demolish buildings on site, where do those materials go? How do we divert from the landfill? So these are all conversations we're really having early in the process so we can be very intentional behind our choices. Next slide, please. So in terms of maximizing our investment on this project, we're really looking to maximize our project sustainability benefits. And so when we are looking at this, we look at something like, for example, trees. If you maximize your tree canopy, you actually reduce the heat. And if you reduce the heat, you reduce the amount of energy a building consumes. So we're looking for those opportunities in terms of maximizing what we call co-benefits and making sure that we're thinking through our waterfront and making the investment in the right places. Next slide, please. So these are our key strategies. We have a whole host of strategies that we've really assessed in great detail. But in terms of just really summing up, what can we do early and what can we think about and what can we facilitate within the community? And so these are the 3 areas. So reduce construction emissions by really thinking through, can we pioneer some low carbon construction in a public infrastructure space? Are we thinking about space for innovation? Using recycled material within our concrete is something this team is looking to explore and partnering with the university to do so. And then also supporting a circular economy, something really important, thinking about when we demolish whatever structure, what happens with that material? Can we reuse it? Can we reuse it on site? Do we use it on another project? Just really thinking through intentionally and just not continuing to fill our landfills. And then also reduce our operating emissions by harnessing our natural resources for energy efficient operations. Since we have an opportunity when we construct a new building to really have a blank slate in terms of what we could possibly do, which I'll talk about in more detail later. And then also supporting, this is a huge maritime component in this particular area. So we're thinking about how do we support the transition to zero emissions fuel sources for our ferries. And then also improving environmental performance by fostering a more biodiverse city to the extent practical. And then also planning for a warmer world. So making sure we're not thinking about the heat or thinking about the heat implications. And then also just making sure we're managing increasingly heavy rains and that we're not having frequent floods for a structure that we really intentionally are trying to avoid that. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, there are a whole host of design strategies that this team has been exploring. And when we think about accounting for the constraints and opportunities, these are the 4 primary areas that we are thinking about. We're thinking about what's the space requirement? What's the scale of that impact? What's the cost implication? And how feasible is this? So in terms of, for example, a geothermal application, you have to drill deep into a structure. How deep do you need to drill? Are you drilling anyway? Can we think more intentionally behind what we're doing here? And so I think those are the conversations that the team continues to explore the limits on. And as I described earlier, we want to really maximize those co-benefits. Next slide, please. So we have set a goal, which is honestly very aggressive for this team, because we really want to make sure that we're really thinking through our material choices. We don't want to be contributing to the problem, the very problem that we're of why we're encountering sea level rise. So it's highly carbon intensive. So just for perspective, this is 245,000 metric tons of emissions. That is a lot of emissions, just for scaling. And so it's really driven by this need to utilize concrete and steel. And so how do we facilitate a reduction? And so we think we can, just based on the availability of the market right now. There's some people already in this space really looking to innovate, that we could get a 35% reduction just through intentional choices such as using recycled steel, low carbon concrete, etc. But really getting to that 50% reduction is going to be really challenging, and we have to think about how do we use bio-based materials such as timber structures, and how we further optimize the material use. We don't want to be wasting any materials because material wasted is emissions wasted. So we really are thinking about, so on the bottom there, we're thinking about the low carbon alternatives, some of the bio-based materials, and circular economy. What can we use on site? Next slide, please. So also along the emissions line, there are the building, and buildings consume quite a bit of energy, as we all have been talking about, very energy intensive grid. And so as we build this project, we expect that operating assets will become more efficient with industry and technology changes. So we're really trying to think about, okay, what is the building of the future? How energy efficient could it be? And what kind of reduction can we achieve through utilization of renewable energies? And so the Ferry Hub, you can see here, there's a lot of uses and it's very energy intensive process, and we are trying to do a 50% reduction in the Ferry Hub component. There's some massive buildings there. We're going to see a lot of energy used, and the graphics on the bottom are to depict how if we utilize the space, the rooftop space for PV panels and using green roof and using a combination, which I'll talk about the green roof, why we're thinking about that more intentionally, and utilizing rooftop space to supply solar and then couple that with geothermal. So thinking about how do we source our energy. Next slide, please. So in terms of how do we reduce operating carbon by 50%, we really have to harness our multiple energy sources. We can, rely on offshore wind. At this time, this project's being constructed. However, we want to be a leader in this space and show people like things are possible when you think through things very early. So how do we continue to maximize opportunities for low carbon operations and forge partnerships to make sure we're really thinking through the possibilities? So solar and geothermal are going to really meet the core energy needs. In terms of the wind energy options, it's very limited, the amount of energy, and also the tidal energy. So those are preliminarily not real feasible possibilities, not a really good use of investment, but the geothermal and solar are currently where we're going to focus our attention. Next slide, please. So in terms of thinking through the habitat, fostering habitat connections, we really want to think through what we call the habitat connectivity. So how do we connect from the north to the south and really have what we call a continuous habitat corridor? So thinking through, okay, where are there gaps of habitat and how do we continue to support? So this graphic, it shows in the green, our successes, and then also in the red are challenges. And at the end of the day, right, so we're going to leave the Battery Maritime building as is, and so that creates a habitat gap. So how do we think about or think through what habitat? Also, we're thinking about what habitat can this really support more meaningfully, and what can we do to support also the aquatic habitat as well as the terrestrial habitat? So we continue to explore, and these are our primary goals and then also our challenges. Next slide, please. And so also for heat, when we talk about heat, we talk about shading. So interestingly, the south portion in the Resilient Ferry Hub, we have a lot of buildings and we also have a lot of heat, a lot of solar. And so as much as we can utilize the solar, we are going to see an increase in heat in that area. So we really want to make sure that we're thinking through shade in those areas. Fortunately, within the building, it should be okay. But when we think about heat and the amount of heat emitted, that means we have to think about energy efficiency. So there's a lot of thinking, well, if this happens, then this happens. And so that's what our team has been really exploring in the energy sustainability work stream. And so these are, again, in the green are some of what we are seeing as really quick wins. And then the red are the areas that are really challenging for us to overcome. So really being transparent about that process. Next slide, please. And last but not least, that we have also managing our stormwater. So thinking about how do we manage the water on the dry side of the land. So thinking through how does the pump station get used? When does it get used? How do we utilize permeable paving? How do we place that in the right places? One of the challenges when we talk about a flood wall is it can't be too close to the flood wall, otherwise you will have structural challenges. So we have to think about infiltration, stormwater management, and really quantity management is really our primary key goal here. Next slide, please. And with that, I close and open the floor to any questions.
Can you go back one slide? I just want to pass it out.
Yeah, just on this slide, can you just identify what's underground versus above? Is this all under the blue interceptor and pump system in the? in this slide?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think our plan is currently to use below grade structure. So nothing should really be visible except permeable paving. Julia, feel free to layer in here.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Things are still in flux, of course. The cisterns, of course, would be below grade. The green infrastructure corridor would be, something that you could interact with, on your walk along this wonderful waterfront, as well as the permeable paving. The pump station is a structure that right now we're planning for at the base of what we're calling Old Slip Terminal, so the rebuilt Pier 11. I think, how elevated that is still something that we're working through. But it is a priority of this project to ensure that the facilities that we're developing are integrated into the landscape.
Okay, so I'm sure everyone's got plenty of questions. Okay. Michael.
I'm wondering if you've studied the FDR Drive, the viaduct, Brooklyn Bridge down to the Battery Maritime Building. If you've studied it, I think you identified it as a source of heat, and that was a problem. Have you considered it, if it remains, to be a collector of rainwater, or in some way, dealing with some of the advantages of having it up? And if it comes down, have you considered using it as part of your infill?
Which building, Michael, repeated?
The FDR Drive.
The FDR, yeah, I've seen even heard of building.
This is Alexis, and I can answer that. And so we have not studied the FDR in that respect in this phase of work. And by this phase of work, I mean, everything that's happened basically 2022, 2023, 2024. The plan, as part of the previous phase of work, FIDE Seaport the project can go on. It works as a flood defense project with or without the FDR viaduct in the future. That said, we are open to studying, and I really mean study. There needs to be like a study about exactly as you laid it out, Michael. What does it mean? What purpose could it serve if it stays? What purpose could it serve if it leaves? Something to inform kind of future decisions about the FDR. That's not part of our current scope because, like I said, it's not directly tied to our project. We also are happy if we are kind of directed to take on that study. It clearly is kind of an integral part of this overall waterfront. But again, those decisions kind of lay with, and I know the Borough President is in support, but we haven't received clear direction or, to be honest, don't have it in our current scope in terms of being funded.
So if not now, when?
And Alexis, I don't know if you mentioned this, but the FDR is also not city jurisdiction, it's state jurisdiction.
Right.
Right. So that level of decision making is outside of us. And part of why, we don't have direct control over it, or it's not formally in our scope.
So I think I'll be a good follow-up to that. I have 5 questions. One will be a comment about particularly what Michael Kramer's talking about, and that, thank you, Fatim, for being here. That goes to both our state assembly members, which are Charles Paul's office and Grace Lee, because the level of the FDR crosses both borders of 8061 and 8065, that Community Board 1 would like to see a study. We don't want it just taken down to be taken down. We would like to see a study of what adaptive reuse it might have. If you take it down, what are the consequences and opportunities that come with both of that? And we would love to see something started post-congestion pricing, because that will determine traffic flow. And there's been a lot of discussion about the traffic coming on and off the bridges and going around and through the central business district and around. So we understand, and this goes back to the team and Assemblymember Lee and everything involved with state DOT, that it's not just a study that says, hey, what's the ramifications for taking it down? But what opportunities exist? How much will it be to fix it? You know, is it the highest high line we've ever seen in the United States with unparalleled views of the city? Is it something that's divided in half and used half for transit and half for public benefit? But it's a very large study that we'd like to see. And that belongs with our state elected officials. So that's, thank you, Alexis, for pointing that out. Pushing it right across the table, and thank you, Fatim, for being here. All right, back to the presentation. I have 4 questions on that. First is, when you talk about reducing emissions, construction is a big conversation and dialogue, but I find it somewhat, and this is not meant to be offensive, but a bit frustrating that when we were having conversations early on in terms of resiliency projects, one of the things that we said that we know based on district service cabinet and the billions of years the community board has been here and working with our agency partners in the city is that we have an issue for DOT, DDC, and DSNY in Community Board 1. As soon as the Brooklyn Bridge Park on the Brooklyn side was made, they lost all of their parking, which means all of their construction equipment has come onto the Manhattan side, which is, they need to have a place to put their equipment. And one of the things that we talked about when we were redoing this is one of the amazing opportunities to create, as long as you're putting in larger places to displace water, opportunities to have locations for DOT, DDC, and DSNY to put their vehicles. So there are construction vehicles which are on our streets 24/7 and used for security for UNGA every single year, once or twice a year. Every storm, every emergency needs to be accessible. And we're just adding to the problem if we're not building an infrastructure that provides opportunities for them to have a place to go. So I ask, when you're looking in this corridor, to consider that. Because originally we were told it's not resiliency related, but you've actually opened the door with the reduced emissions, and that is all about what we're talking about, is a place to put these so we're not trucking around the trucks all over the city when they're needed in Lower Manhattan. That's one. 2, you talked about green roofs versus solar. One of the things that really is surprising me about this dialogue is we have talked about from the very, very beginning, any roof becoming green and public space, not necessarily solar, not necessarily some of the other things that you were mentioning in terms of energy, but really adding, when you're adding more buildings like the pump station, for example, and whether it's the service of the ferries on the bottom, but utilizing the top to be public green space, which is in short supply, and efforts of, for what we've talked about, that space that you outlined as parkland was widely also recognized and acknowledged to not necessarily be parkland versus pathways with greenery to facilitate transit access back and forth. So I challenge the question on the rooftops back to, yes, we want them green, but we're looking for public space, not solar necessarily on the top. We're looking for everything. So to find a way to accommodate something would be great, but not in the level of privatization of the roofs, which we've seen, but really public benefit.
Yeah, and I can just jump in here real quick. I think, Tammy, that's a good comment, and I appreciate your feedback here. I think, for us, the graphics that we're showing here, both on the screen as well as the slides before, this phase of work has really been about just identifying the opportunities and what are and identifying the constraints as well. Like the exact application of, how much of a ferry terminal roof is deemed solar panels versus, a potential open space opportunity. Those things are still very much in flux, but I think it's really important for us to understand kind of like what we're working with and understand like what's in our toolkit so that in the later stages of work, this fall, next year, we can start to really kind of flesh out exactly what these could look like.
and the answer on the emissions and trying to protect our carbon footprint from the requirement of the trucks that, you know, are never gonna, even if they're electric, they still need a place to be, and charging stations and the like. Is that gonna ever be something that's built into this project for DOT, DSNY, and DDC?
Maybe I can just say a little
Yeah.
bit, and maybe Alexis, if you want to.
Mhm.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think like the the issue of construction staging is something that is obviously of huge concern for this team and for CB1. And again, not the most satisfying answer, but these are questions that have not yet been sorted out. But these are things that we're considering as we develop what construction could look like.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is the desire for something like a agency parking depot?
Yes.
On the, okay. Sorry, that
Underground.
feels underground. I think that's part of the challenge, the
Mhm.
underground piece. But yeah, okay, that's helpful. Yeah, Alexis, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so there are kind of two things here. So we meet quite frequently with DOT, other operators in this area. Aside from kind of the existing parking that they have at Staten Island Ferry Terminal, they haven't expressed a kind of strong need for an additional volume of parking. So I only say that if it's something that's like needs to be considered, I think that there's probably like a larger kind of systemic conversation that needs to happen about where they're parking today, why that isn't working, everything else. It's just not a request that I've heard. And then, the other thing is that, every bit of space is precious. So if we do give it over to parking, it will be at the cost of something else. And so a lot of our underground infrastructure right now is going to the part that's not coastal resilience is going to stormwater capture. It's going to other things that are actually serving some of kind of the greener uses of the site. So I think it would just need to be something that we thought of in terms of the overall performance.
Okay, no problem. I'm happy to set up with EDC a meeting with DOT because quite frankly, our goals for Gotham Park and the East River will not be accomplished unless we can work with DOT and DDC and DSNY, who uses all of the space for their staging all the way around Brooklyn Bridge. So, it's the catch-22 on two ends. But I'll take that for another day. The last thing was, we were promised Brooklyn Bridge Beach. It was funded by Gail Brewer, not for an ecological lookover or looking for something that's akin to a Gansevoort type of space that's over there, not a space that is an overlook to an ecological center. Accessibility for all, feet in the sand is what we've been talking about, and Community Board 1 for decades. So while I appreciate the beautiful look of a potential cove with an overlook and something ecological, that's 125% not what we're looking at. It's a 180-degree turn away from what we have been funded, partially funded, promised. I mean, it's super clear. There's absolutely no question what the community board for decades, even before I got here, and most of the people around this table got here, have said it was a fully accessible touchdown to the area, working on to create a cove that is 100% accessible. So I leave that out there and hope that that dialogue is not firm.
Can you give any response on that? Anybody? I'm just curious whether it's.
Yeah, so I think the subject that area that you're talking about, Tammy, is the northernmost part underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. This will be the subject of kind of further design workshops and stakeholder inputs as we move on beyond our kind of current conceptual design. We continue to understand the request for a beach and the need for a beach, and I think it's balancing that with some of the ecological value that has also been encouraged by some of the other stakeholders. And I think that it's still in flux, and it's something that we're open to.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I was gonna say that, I'm curious who those stakeholders are, but I don't want to give up my time for my questions. So thank you for this. It's always great, and I just want to thank you again for engaging the community. That's always, it's not easy, and, we're difficult, so thank you for coming. So thank you. I also love the parking. Parking is a big issue. We've been saying from the very early on, that parking is an issue. And I had one other kind of little idea, and I like the idea of putting trees in there. When 9/11 Memorial was being built and thought about, they started growing the saplings. I don't even know where they grew them, off-site. And it took many, many years. So by the time they were transferred to the 9/11 site, and I know the acorns that they used or the seeds that they used had symbolic, meaning and everything else. I think this is going to be one of those projects from an art and historic and thoughtful, what those trees are, what they mean. I think we should plant those seeds, or acorns now, or whatever. I don't know what the resilient tree of preference is. I think that those should be in planters along the FDR as soon as humanly possible, with explanation, with an art and education outlook to, as we're walking along the, not very attractive area along the FDR that we all use right now, to say, right now there's money for the idea, but we don't have money to build it right now, as we all know. But we're putting these seedlings in the ground, and we're going to watch them every year. And this is part of, when the park opens, they're going to be a part of the new space. And I just want more of, more connection to the humanity and the nature and the in the public. And I think the hardest part with all these projects is that, and I so appreciate the thought and effort that goes into all of this. You guys think about this all the time, and it's very hard for the public to know that we're doing anything. And that's my crazy little idea.
Okay. It's fine. Anybody else in the room? Questions, comments?
Do we know who those other stakeholders are?
Yeah, I'd love to know.
I have it.
First, thank you for that, Wendy, and I hear what you're saying, and we have this conversation all the time, right? About how do we connect these huge projects to the people who are using the spaces every day in a way that is meaningful and comes across. So I get your point, and happy to take that back and talk about it, and really neat idea with the trees specifically, but also hear your larger point about kind of how we're getting this across. And I don't disagree with you that in the day-to-day can feel quite disconnected from the overall long-term planning that's happening. And on the point of stakeholders, I think I missed specifically what that was. Was that in regard to Brooklyn Bridge Beach?
Yeah, I think the idea is that, to Tammy's point, and I will say the community board's been pretty active about this, but if you're in Brooklyn, on the Brooklyn side of the Brooklyn Bridge, you can walk down to the water, and everyone loves what, was just built in Greenwich Village. And I think that, so we're kind of over the it's not feasible part at this point. And honestly, there's going to be sea level rise. So whatever beach is there now, we probably won't see much of that, but there'll be, something else. Is there some sort of ramping down? Because I think the other thing we've realized is that, people want to, there'll be a day of water, and people want to build, crazy little boats for the day of water or other things. And, if there's no way to rescue somebody that, falls over, we have to have a way to get down to the water.
Yeah, I mean, there is a way to get down there right now, right? The get down was just built. There's a gate. It does accommodate access for City of Water Day and things like that. But if I'm understanding, and I know, right, because I wrote a lot of these resolutions myself, the idea is that like, we understand and we hear you loud and clear, right? There's a desire for interactive, as Mark Amaruso would say, unfettered access to the water.
That's true.
So we hear you, and like Alexis said,
And
that's
I'll
something
quote
we're
Betty Kay
continuing
as
to.
saying accessibility.
Definitely, yeah.
Below the Brook, so building
Yeah.
one side of the Brooklyn Bridge with a 10-20 foot high overlook doesn't necessarily connect well unless you're planning at the same time the two. They've got to be in tandem.
Yeah, I think we hear you and we get it, and no one necessarily disagrees, right? But there are a lot of trade-offs that we're working through. There are a lot of constraints, and I think we're all trying to meet in the middle where we can.
I just think that a lot of people that are planning that don't live here.
What are
And so my feeling is they should live around here. No, it's just things like, I'm gonna live here, you know what I'm saying? Because we are protected.
Yeah, and Tammy, I'm not speaking specific, I'm speaking about the project generally when I talk about trade-offs. Like with the cars, right? If we put in parking, then it takes something else away. I'm talking, generally about trade-offs.
But
Stakeholders, we love you, Diana.
Vera.
Stakeholders. Wanted to know the stakeholders.
You wanted to know the stakeholders.
Alexis.
Oh, yeah, no, I can speak more to that. So there obviously are a lot of stakeholders in our New York Harbor that really care about restoring kind of ecological functions that maybe were once there. Obviously, we know that there are benefits to having, let's say, oysters or other aquarian habitat that fish can feed on. And again, it's just a question of the trade-offs. I'm not saying like a beach is a wonderful natural feature. It's not ecologically productive, but it serves its own need and it has a high social value. And so I really want to say like none of this is set. I think it's just really important to understand that there are options. And the answer just that it's not feasible isn't a good enough answer unless we bring back to you kind of the lack of feasibility. And it really is just kind of about, trading off one kind of high performance ecological function for what really is a very high social value. And I understand that from what you all are saying.
Vera, does that answer your question? It seemed like that wasn't quite answered, Alexa. I think.
Oh, the okay, yeah. So I would say, for instance, like wedge guidelines are a perfect example for key performance indicators. So like Waterfront Alliance, HEP, Hudson River Estuary Program. Generally, I would think that yes, other people who are invested in restoring ecology in the harbor would want to see kind of some ecological restoration there.
So the ecological groups you're working for now, I don't know the Hudson River Estuary Program. I mean, I know the Hudson River Advisory Board, the council, but I don't know what that is. But the Waterfront Alliance is one of the two groups, and then some Hudson River group. Is that specific?
Yeah, I think those would be general stakeholders, and I could provide others. The Hudson River Estuary Program is run by Rob Pirani, and it's actually a designation by EPA to provide ecological benefit from. Yeah, it's similar to Hudson River Foundation.
If you could just send us a list that we could really understand that, and that lovely. And I'm just.
Of course.
To call on. So Carrie Parker Davidson, you had your hands up. Are you still there? Yeah, there you are. Thanks.
I am. I just had a question about the soundness of making way for parking along sort of the river front. Because at some point, things will give and we may not, like, isn't it better to stage those things further inland rather than giving up sort of public space amenities along the shoreline? for parking.
Carrie, that's why we were talking below ground. So like, if you've got a ferry terminal below the ferry terminal, if you're building up, we were talking below ground, not giving up public space above ground.
Right, but if that fails, then what happens? Like, let's assume that the architecture fails. Now you've got all of your emergency vehicles in harm's way, right? Isn't it better to put those center island?
The emergency vehicles are pulled out in cases of emergency. We learned that from all the storm preparedness, that they are pulled out. If you take a look when we have hurricane and all that other stuff, they pull out the salt spreaders, the this, the that. And I wish we had space mid-island, but the only space we have happens to be AKA Gotham Park. So if we're gonna try and get any kind of space above ground, we don't have a ton of space. If you're gonna build a building that's new, hopefully, and already have safeguarded it because you are with this new project. That's why we were hoping to get some space to be able to enliven more space around the Brooklyn Bridge.
Okay, really good points. Do you, Alexa or team, do you want to address the parking issue in what you're studying at this point and where you're going with that? It's a big issue that we're going to continue to hear a lot about. So in terms of.
Yeah, no, I think that without having complete knowledge of Gotham Park and what the needs are, I actually would like to take Tammy up on her offer to kind of follow up with DOT, because I don't have a sense of kind of the scale of the need.
I'm happy.
All right. Anybody else new on the hit parade here of the thing? I can't ever.
Nope.
It's too small. Okay, great. Michael.
I'm just curious about your scope of work. Do you have the entire waterfront from the Battery or the Battery Maritime Building up to the Brooklyn Bridge, or are you constrained by some of the existing leases at Pier 6, Pier 15, Pier 17, Pier 18?
So the answer to both questions is yes. We are looking at the entire waterfront from the Battery to the Brooklyn Bridge. And of course, there are existing assets there, existing operators, some of the leases that EDC controls, some that, we don't. All of these, much like construction phasing, will still need to be worked out. Our goal is to maintain operations as much as possible for critical facilities, but also for facilities that maybe we could, during construction, provide alternate sites for. But none of that has been the focus of our current phase of work, but it certainly is something that we know that we need to really start to kind of seriously consider the timing of the phasing and what that means for those leases.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Tammy, last one.
Excuse me one second, I apologize. This is our conference.
Okay, all right. I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, many thanks to doing this. It's really helpful, and the more of it, the better, of course. And I know it's like a long night for me, but we all appreciate it. One thing I think would be incredibly helpful is we had a meeting last week at the executive committee on the Chinatown connection, which is all about Park Row. And what we saw, which DOT provided, and what was apparent was there is very little resiliency work being done in some of these projects. And we spoke a little bit about the lack of any kind of resilient paving or asphalt. And I've forgotten now the name of the guy that presented, but he said, well, it's not in our toolkit. And when I look at the plan, it's not up anymore, but when I looked at the plan, if you can just leave up that slide, the slide that shows the overall, the amount of paving there is. I just wondered if there's an opportunity to sit down with DOT and potentially the community to talk a little bit about the pavement, the pavers, opportunities to really capitalize on what you're doing with this project that could be looked at throughout all the projects that are now going on in the city. I mean, for the Department of Transportation to answer to the request to have resilient materials in a new Park Row condition and say, well, we don't have it in our toolkit, it's a problem. That's a problem. Like, the city should be working on this. Like, I don't know who is responsible for that particular conversation, but it seems like something we really should pursue. And obviously, your project, when you look at a slide like this, has an immense amount of paving. So is that something we could organize, like a paving conference, and understand what are the inroads in paving? And with that, at the same time, or in a different presentation, would be the other potential bugaboo here, which are the deployables and the walls. I don't think people have a real understanding of what these look like, what this is made out of, the pros and cons, what's happening in terms of disadvantaged pieces already with graffiti and such. You know, maybe this is part of that package of looking at just the sort of kit of parts and how the city is using them and what's out there. You know, are we really doing the best we can, and are we using these throughout the city's planning? And lastly, I just have a question. So that's a request, and I would love an answer. A question is to how, if at all, you're working with the federal government on the HATS project. Is that something that is alive in your office with what you're doing, or it's kind of like, okay, that's not happening right now, we don't have to worry about it? And also with the Battery Park City Authority and the plans over there at Pier A.
Yeah. So I'll start with HATS. It is very much alive in our office, and I will say as a kind of interagency focus. I think it is a mistake to ignore HATS, not because of there's like any certainty that it will be implemented as is, but I think because you really have to look at HATS within the context of like our larger citywide goals for resilience. And that means like, you know, engaging with it in a way that really understands that there are components of it that would be highly beneficial, but maybe there are also components of it that don't reflect the priorities of the city or would need to kind of be redesigned in a way that is more integrated with our overall citywide vision. So yes, we engage with HATS. Yes, we engage with, you know, what it means overall for the city's future. And I'll say it benefits all of us to engage with HATS because, you know, even if we have an alternate vision, then we need to be engaging with the Army Corps.
Question. Yeah, I was just wondering how often and how robust that engagement is more the tenor of my question.
Right. So EDC isn't the lead agency on HATS. The Bureau of Coastal Resilience out of DEP is. But fortunately, the Bureau has taken very strongly its mission to kind of organize the city agencies around engaging with HATS. And so that organization is going on. And I know it started with the agencies, but it very soon will be brought to kind of the broader community. So I just say kind of stay tuned on that. There's nothing definitive there, but just that, you know, it's another moment. Kind of the Army Corps went off and was responding to things, but it's important to engage probably in the upcoming year. The question of paving, I would absolutely be happy to do a paving summit. I think it's something EDC thinks about quite often, especially as part of our kind of green economy action plan. I will say that different agencies are kind of encumbered by different restrictions. And so, you know, EDC definitely is very engaged with Envision and what that means in terms of incorporating different kind of permeable materials. But, you know, there are also many considerations that DOT has to go through in terms of like, you know, they can't test new materials on site. They have to have gone through various, you know, engineering standards and everything else. So, but I think it's very worthy to engage in that conversation, and I'm always happy. I think I'd invite our green economy team and our capital team that's looking at some of that stuff.
That would be fantastic. Boy, I love these meetings. If nothing else, you get a promise for the next meeting.
And then I turn to Diana and I say, Diana, can
I
you?
turn to her right now, actually. And then, the other part of that were the deployables in the walls. You know,
Right.
the actual,
So
Yeah,
also happy to do that. When you talk about kind of the design of the deployables, we are not that far enough along on FIDI Seaport. Some of the other projects are, and I know that they share lessons, but I think, you know, it would be useful for them to share kind of some of the more advanced designs about their gates and deployables. We're just at an early enough phase in design where, you know, we don't even have engineering drawings, let alone renderings of what the various gates would look like. But again,
so they'll look very different than the ones that are just north to you that are already there? Is there like a whole different kit of parts for?
we haven't actually determined what the kit of parts is. You know, there's a vocabulary for the city-led projects, which I think it makes a lot of sense to be in keeping with, but also as we learned from tonight, there are many more. Concrete is a very carbon intensive, and so is steel. It doesn't mean we're going to avoid those things, but I think we would, you know, want to be innovating in terms of how we're thinking about the kind of tried and true design versus what it is that an additional 10 years of resilience project mean in terms of improving, you know, certain elements.
So so the city is open to altering what may not have worked or not have worked successfully as they had hoped north of your site and change things and modify things accordingly coming into the FIDI Seaport area. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, the city hasn't really dictated one way or another because we haven't gotten that far along in designing the gates.
So who would we want to invite for that summit on deployables and walls?
So Lorian Farrell, who's Bureau of Coastal Resilience, definitely. I think DDC should be involved. And then, of course, the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice keeps tabs on all of these projects.
Well, I think this is really helpful. I really appreciate the you know, additional follow-throughs, infinite follow-throughs, but I have many other questions. I think this will do it if we can just really anchor some great solutions, because these things are opportunities for the city. And
Absolutely.
I hope that all the agencies can work together. And when I heard this presentation saying that the Department of Transportation didn't have resilient materials in their kit of parts, it did give me pause. So I'm glad to hear that we will have a follow-up summit. Okay, I think Tammy had 2 additional questions, and I think we can call it a night pretty soon. Go ahead, Tammy.
One of the questions I wanted to ask might be a quick one, so I'll start with that. Do you have any kind of hints, updates, or anything on the Coast Guard site? And how it relates?
No. Even as we've continued to talk to the Coast Guard, it hasn't really, there's not a ton of kind of like substantive discussion on the future. It's more about getting to the right people. So I don't have an update right now.
Didn't you say your congressman was calling you?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Well, I think the continuing discussions is something that the public will be happy to hear, that there are at least continuing discussions.
Definitely.
Because I think at the last meeting that we had, it was still silence. So I think that's a good sign. And then my more lengthy question has to do with the power grids and the power opportunity, what we're looking at along this. I don't remember if there was a slide that went with it, but there's been a lot of an extraordinary amount of dialogue about Pier 6, the heliport, in the drawings that all are being shown to us now since the last in-person shred. The Pier 6 is moved directly attached to the Battery Maritime building. So that's one. Of course, I'm curious about that. And one of the reasons why I'm asking about power and how it relates specifically to that pier and others and what we're doing is the conversation about Blue Highway.
Mm-hmm.
And we now know with the legislation that's out in the assembly and the state about closing the west side heliport, which will send more, and that's very recent, that's been introduced and is widely popular because it has to do with the Pier 76 redevelopment. But what the closing of that heliport means, a greater amount of traffic to the downtown helipad, because it will be one of the few left vibrant in New York City. So I'd like to know, one, if you know anything about that, and two, how that's gonna work. Yeah, this slide doesn't even show the Pier 6 movement necessarily. Yeah, no, Pier 6. If there's another one that you have to keep going with, this shows the whole look. But, you know, under maybe,
Yeah, keep going.
yeah, kind of
There's one
going
at the
back.
end.
There you go, stop. That's it. Okay, great. So understanding what we're talking about for the helipad and the heliport, which now will produce significantly more noise, although there have been presentations and proposals about electrified helicopters, understanding how the grid for energy will work along this entire path, knowing that we are hoping to do a more electrified seaport, and the Governor's Island will have the first fully electrified ferry in our district area. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how electricity or what power grid opportunities you will be putting in here that will go with the future greening of the helipad, the blue highways, the ferries, and all of it. I don't see anything necessarily in here. And I know that there has to be a chicken and egg conversation that we've heard from those who have presented to us, that the city has to decide what infrastructure they're putting in, so then the boats could be purchased that match the infrastructure.
And then better answer.
Right, so,
Right.
So I do not know about the legislation for the heliport that you are referring to. I think perhaps other people at EDC, and I don't even think Diana, it's probably Mikkel who would have more information on that, and city law. So maybe we should get back to you on that. I'm happy to.
Sorry to cut
Go
you
ahead.
off.
No, please, Diana.
I'm happy to follow up, and I think you all know Tara, who also is in government and community relations, but covers the transportation portfolio. So happy to follow up on that specifically. But you're right. After how long helicopter noise has been an issue, we're also right on the threshold of crossing into a world of electrical when it comes to helicopters, when it comes to ferries. And if I'm understanding the question, it's how do we plan for accommodating those transitions as we continue to move forward? We're doing that, for instance, at Manhattan Cruise Terminal when it comes to things like shore power. So I'll defer on the technicalities of that question. But if folks can kind of speak to how we're proactively planning to support things like eVTOL and electric helicopters and the continued electrification of our ferry system as we move forward, and things like that. And I suppose leaving room for changes that we might not know of yet, right? Because they're so far in the future, but would be helpful to hear a little more specifics on kind of how we're planning broadly for that.
Yeah, so, and
Sorry, well, hang on, let her answer and then follow up. Is that okay? Good. Go ahead.
So, and Tammy, when you were referring to kind of like the vessels are waiting for the infrastructure, I actually think that it's a like both and. So we need to be planning to provide the infrastructure that can accommodate and adapt to electric ferry vehicles. And again, you know, there's a timing consideration, but our whole plan for building a 21st century waterfront is to be adaptive to that transition. And that's true as well to what's being planned for the heliport. And that actually is including kind of incentives for a transition to eVTOLs, which are less noisy. Some of that transition depends on forces outside of EDC's control, having to do with the private market. But I will say that we have to rebuild the heliport. So we have shown it shifting here. Regardless, because of its susceptibility to sea level rise, we will need to demolish the current pier and rebuild it. We could rebuild it in place, but what this shows is an optimizing of its kind of positioning, where we're actually moving it closer to the other uses. So in order to kind of concentrate on that area of waterfront and provide additional kind of broader swaths of open space in between where the heliport is and all the green space you see running to the Brooklyn Bridge. So it could be replaced on the same footprint it is now, but this is kind of an optimized, both from kind of a separating operations and also consolidating some of the kind of like heavier waterfront uses.
I appreciate that. I just would also like to note that the Battery Wharf is not being rebuilt with any electrical infrastructure because the current boats do not utilize that. And there was no infrastructure, conduits, or anything built necessarily in ground for any eventuality for it. So that's why I'm bringing it up here, because it doesn't seem like we have, well, yes, I hear Diana, I've read the articles about the marine terminals up on the Upper West Side. In terms of Lower Manhattan and CB1, we're not building for the future. And I would like to ensure that the East Side has a different perspective and look on it. And it is not, and again, that we don't build to what we have now, and we don't build a full commercial corridor that goes all the way around CB1 without any kind of, quite frankly, you can't go touch the water. There'll be a tiny little place that I don't even know if you're gonna be able to touch it, just north of Pier A once that's done. But otherwise, until you get to Pier 25 and 6 and you're on a school field trip for the estuarium, there's no touch to the water anywhere south of Gansevoort for us. At CB.
Sarah had one more.
Yeah, I'm also very curious. I haven't heard anything about, the mayor at one point, not long ago, had said that the bicycle delivery hub would be on a pier in Lower Manhattan, and there would be huge fleets of bicycle delivery people leaving from there. And I don't hear anybody talking about that. And yet he had a press conference that, you know, there are more ships coming in and more heliports and it's blah, blah, blah.
I think I know what's being referenced. It's the new RFP for downtown Manhattan heliport. Because when it was re-released, it had a maritime freight or micro freight component. So I don't know offhand what the status of that is, but I'm happy to follow up on that.
Yeah, because whole bike corridors are gonna be needed for these deliverymen.
Yeah.
My husband was cut off by a bicycle deliveryman and broke both wrists on a regular flight. I mean, this is really dangerous. I've been sideswiped by them. This is a big deal. I don't see anything about that anywhere.
Yeah, that's a fair
It's
point.
increasing. It's not going away.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we look to increasingly try to get truck traffic off the streets and utilize the waterways more, utilize more electric cargo, we're like figuring out how to redo this all over again, right? So I think it starts with introducing the potential of the use on downtown Manhattan heliport is one step, but it doesn't get us all the way there, right? This is like a system that we're planning for here, and I think it's a good point.
But this is something the mayor has already announced is happening.
Yeah, but he announced an RFP. It doesn't mean it does happen. It means it's a goal to happen.
I think, you know, that point that you're raising, you know, that everybody's raising, it's underlined. I mean, I think it's required that you all in these incredibly important positions who are reconsidering the entire coastal region, you know, you're basically rethinking the city itself in some ways, right? And that is part that I'm never confident about, because I find the conversations among the jurisdictional groups a little bit,
The lack of
a little
communication.
bit of a question, and we talked about this when you were with us on the board, and I just think that's something that everyone really needs to keep in mind, because the fact that DOT doesn't have the same materials that you, that the north walls would look different than the south, I mean, that's all fine, but somebody needs to be thinking about all that, and I never know who that somebody or somebody's are, but I would just impress upon you that in all this planning, that these drawings sometimes encompass the whole and talk about how it does all connect, whether it's to the north with the plans and the walls that are to the north of you, to the south and around the peninsula, to an electrical grid that may be underground. I just would always keep that goal in mind as much as you can as we go forward in conversations. I think it's tremendous effort to look at the sustainability. And I think we're gonna have a lot of very interesting follow-up. Up, can't see, last one.
If
Yeah,
I
by
could
30th.
follow up on your thought of the DOT and coming up with standards for cement or whatever we end up using. If it's appropriate or when it's appropriate, you could include the governing bodies of whatever, of the co-ops and the building owners, where we could encourage them to use that kind of material, or where they have questions have been promulgated and nobody knows the answer and doesn't have to go to DOT or somebody else in charge, and what can we use, and we have to get rid of all this cement, now what?
Well, I think you'll have to go through DOT if you're looking to get
But they
the
don't
sidewalk
have-
material, no matter what, but I think the idea that the building owners are invited to any kind of presentation on, considerations of paving, throughout the city, and I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Anyway, we look forward to the follow-ups, which I'll just say include now the Envision group coming to talk about, I guess that's the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure, their program Envision, which is that third-party certification that we haven't heard about yet, which is very exciting, that thanks to Diana, I hope we're gonna maybe get that in June. And then we have our pavement, Summit, thank you. I was looking for something alliterative, but I couldn't come up with it. Pavement Summit, which I think is really great. Hopefully, of course, with DOT and whatever else we need to have there. And then deployable open walls, which we will follow up with. So, and then parking. And we also have the FDR state DOT, city DOT conversation. So hopefully all this gets done. And the not in the not too distant future, but we can start with, the first one and go down the list. And I just want to thank everybody immensely for your time and the terrific presentation and the really very thoughtful set of considerations. And as always, a brilliant sort of way of having a Q&A and engaging us all. So that's it for me, and it's a good night unless anyone has anything else to add. I think that I just want to thank you all and say good night.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right.